Fans of the channel may have noticed that it has been a while since I published a video about a Civilization VI story. Civilization VI stories are what this channel was founded on. They are my bread and butter. But yeah, it's been a while since I published one, and you're about to find out why. Welcome to Civilization VI Stories, where we explore alternatives to history through the lens of the world's most addictive video game. Some weeks ago, I published a video ranking Civ VI's win conditions. In it, I mentioned that winning by a score victory is actually impossible. My contention being that players or the AI will win by some other victory condition before the game runs out of turns. In fact, after almost a decade, yes, next year we'll see the 10-year anniversary of the release of Civ VI, I had yet to ever win a score victory. My Hall of Fame is complete. I have multiple wins even with more than a few leaders, but alas, not a single score victory. Though I had never won by this means, I did suggest that winning a score victory could be manufactured. Wanting to add a score victory to my list of Civ VI accomplishments, I decided to try to make that happen by making a score victory the only available win condition. Once upon a time, when I was busy playing Civ II, it was a long time ago, okay? I played one game and went about trying to create what, for me, was Utopia. That can mean a lot of things, but at the time I strove to control all of the cities but one, because you got to keep the AI in the game, and have farmland and a railroad on every available tile. 500 turns is a lot in Civ VI. I really have no idea what it means to play that long. But given my experience and the games I've played, I imagined that I might have enough time to build my own Utopia. I understood that it might look a lot different than my Utopia of Civ II, but why not set it as a goal? I also wanted my Utopia to be the most beautiful of utopias, which meant that I wanted to play with a Civ that had a beautiful, unique tile improvement with which to make my Utopia all the more stunning. So I decided to play as the Dutch to make use of their polder tile improvement.
The Dutch! Windmills, wooden shoes, apartheid! There are no clean hands in history.
This game is on Deity with no other game modes. There are no GDRs available. It's on a huge map with maxed out civs and city-states. And of course, score is the only victory condition. Spawning next to a desert doesn't immediately inspire awe and beauty, but I've been through this so many times that nothing phases me. Besides, Slow and Steady is going to win this race. Burn a turn and set up our capital closer to a couple of resources. Let's go. Vietnam is in the game. I got my Pantheon on turn 21 and was able to secure religious settlements. It's kind of a knee-jerk reaction at this point, but I'm not so sure it was the most useful choice in this kind of game when thinking super long-term. Germany is in the game. Although I was sandwiched in by city-states and the environment, I made good early progress and had 3 cities and a secure source of iron by turn 35. Then Australia showed up. Germany did that thing where they left a settler unprotected. I have to, right? The Maya introduced themselves in 1800 BC. The Khmer announced themselves a couple of centuries later. Hoping to make use of being suzerain of Akkad, we decided that, because we were unlikely to secure a religion, Fez would be our first target of expansion. Akkad helped in a big way, and Fez quickly became part of the Dutch Empire. Portugal announced themselves soon after. In 975 BC, we became suzerain of Granada. That was going to become important. 25 years later, we recruited Hannibal Barca, our first great general. Also important. By 850 BC, it was time to continue expanding by invading the city of Johannesburg. Seeing a conflict with Vietnam on the horizon, we levied Granada's forces while our main army was sweeping up the last of Johannesburg's defenses. Phoenicia introduced themselves soon after. Unable to put Johannesburg under siege, capturing the city took a little longer than Fez, but we got the job done. In 500 BC, we built the Temple of Artemis in our capital city of Amsterdam. By 350 BC, our soldiers were in position and Vietnam was already embroiled in a struggle with the Khmer. It was time to begin our aggressive northern expansion. Not sure when we met Macedon, but they weren't thrilled about our early militaristic ambitions. Dutch forces captured the Vietnamese city of Dong Hoi with little resistance and razed it to the ground. Our suzerainty over Akkad was proving very useful as Dutch troops shattered the walls of Hue and took the city, a real prize, in 275 BC. Although there were casualties, Dutch troops took the city of Thang Long in 25 AD, pushing their influence further west and breaking the spine of Vietnam. Unhappy with our military gains, the Maya and Australia united in a war against us. The war was more an excuse for the Maya to advance upon Wolin. Our northern expansion continued undeterred as Dutch soldiers captured Con Quan in 300 AD. 50 years later, with the dawn of the Renaissance, we met Canada, Korea, and Nubia. In 580 AD, we built the Terracotta Army in the capital. In 640 AD, Dutch troops captured Hoaloo. In 700 AD, we built our first polder, the first of many. The last of Vietnam's towns were out of the way and would be difficult to take. It was time for a short peace in order to focus on other things like consolidating our new lands. Khmer lands were also causing loyalty problems, so it was decided we would attack them next. The Dutch were now flush with knights and great generals. They captured Lingapura in 1010 AD. The city was razed to the ground. In 1080 AD, we made first contact with Mongolia. The Dutch entered the industrial era in a golden age. In 1100 AD, we met Hungary. 10 years later, we met Gaul. Feeling confident in our golden age, over the ruins of Lingapura, Dutch settlers founded a pure Dutch city, which they called The Hague. The Dutch were at war again with Vietnam, hoping to reduce them to a footnote in history. In 1250 AD, the growing Dutch navy captured Saigon and razed it to the ground. In 1360, Dutch naval forces finished the job and the Vietnamese were no more. The Khmer put up a formidable resistance to Dutch aggression, but they could only hold back the Orange Tide for so long. With progress being made and the end of the Khmer near at hand, it was time to invade Portugal. When Dutch forces captured Bavapura in 1450, it meant that the Khmer were no more. We captured our main Portuguese target, the city of Évora. Once completed, we decided to make peace with Portugal in order to focus our energies elsewhere. We entered the modern era having strung together back-to-back golden ages. In 1515, Dutch forces captured the Macedonian city of Alexandria by the Latmus and razed it to the ground. When Dutch soldiers captured Ayagai in 1535, it opened up the potential to expand westward. So much of Macedonian land was well protected by their environment, but this exposed stronghold afforded the opportunity to flank them and open up the world to the west. The difficult part would be maintaining the loyalty of these barbarous peoples. With Dutch troops now mobilized in the south, when John Curtin came to us wondering why our forces were now stationed along the border, we explained that it was because we had designs on using their lands for living space. In 1545, we made first contact with Georgia. 5 years later, Dutch soldiers captured Ayani, though they were unable to control Ayagai. Though both cities would flip loyalty and be recaptured many times, the Dutch military presence was growing in the region. Curbing the loyalty problem meant declaring war on Phoenicia to the west. The Ayani-Ayagai channel between Macedon and Phoenicia would shape out to be an important crossroad. Holding this key strategic point would be the fulcrum upon which to control the entire world. But could any one nation ever hold it? Meanwhile, Dutch troops in the southeast, invading Australia, captured Toowoomba in 1580. Controlling the Ayani-Ayagai Straits could not happen through Macedonian and Phoenician lands directly. The Dutch High Military Command determined that the only way through was to first control the independent city-state of Muscat. Continuing their invasion of Australia, Dutch soldiers captured the city-state of Bandar Brunei and eventually Canberra, the Australian capital. Doing so opened the entire eastern frontier and the gateway to Germany. In 1670, Dutch forces captured Muscat, completing the first phase of their major western expansion. In 1685, Portugal and Georgia declared a joint war against the Dutch to curb their military ambitions. The Netherlands would now have to fight on 3 fronts. In 1730, the Dutch navy razed Wolleen to the ground. In a major offensive, they also captured the Phoenician stronghold of Ugarit. It was a major strategic crossroads, dividing the nations of Nubia, Macedonia, Canada, and Phoenicia. It would prove vital but difficult to hold. 30 years later, a coalition of nations would unite to try to wrestle the city free. When Dutch forces captured Adelaide in 1740, it eliminated Australia from the game. Adelaide was razed to the ground. The entire world was in conflict. Ugarit was under siege from Phoenicia and Nubia. The Portuguese navy was attacking the Netherlands' Khmer province from the shore. The core of the Dutch army was invading Germany, and those forces dug in to protect Ugarit were even making slow but steady progress, pushing further west by snatching Napata away from Canada. We entered the information era in a golden age, but so did many of our neighbors. Controlling our gains would not come easy. Ugarit was a major crossroads city, but Ainouk was an island bulwark whose presence protected Phoenician ships in the strait around Cardiff. When Dutch forces captured it in 1844, it exposed both the Phoenician and Nubian mainland as well as Phoenicia's navy in the Libyan Sea. Now under Dutch control, it promised to open new opportunities for Western expansion. The Dutch were making steady progress in their invasion of Germany. In 1856, they took Berlin. That same year, the Western Army took Cardiff. Ainouk's strategic position could not be understated. It was so important that the AI made a rare, concerted effort to retake it. Nubian and Phoenician navies coordinated to retake the city and were successful in 1864, winning a military emergency in the process. After successfully subduing Germany, a brief peace was brokered. This would allow the Dutch military to focus on limiting the influence of other nations. A major operation invading Canada was underway, and in 1896 the Dutch Navy launched an assault and captured the Portuguese capital city of Lisbon. After conquering the whole of Western Canada, Dutch troops successfully unseated its government by capturing the capital, Ottawa, in 1902. With 8 turns left of the Information Age, the Dutch were staring down the barrel of a dark age. That could be a problem, since the next era, the future era, with only a score victory on the table, would last forever. That could mean a very long, dark age for the Dutch. Where would the necessary era score come from? There were no more great people to earn. 8 turns was not enough time to build superfluous wonders. National parks could help us get a substantial amount of points and get us closer to our goal. We had stockpiled a lot of excess faith, but much of the land would also need to be transformed. Eliminating corps and armies, also helpful. Seaside resort, just another milestone. A few national parks later, and we had successfully staved off a dark age. And with 1 turn left before the turn of the era, 3 more national parks later, the Netherlands went from descending into a dark age to rising to yet another, and this time enduring, golden age. At the dawn of 1911, the world entered into the future era.
The future.
168 turns remained. 11 rivals remained in the game. This hardly looked like Utopia, but the Dutch felt they were in a good place. Now having entered into a golden age and comparably strong against our rivals, the hopes and dreams of a utopian Dutch future seemed attainable. The Utopia project was already underway in the homeland and the provinces of Vietnam, Khmer, Australia, and Canada. And if anybody is thinking, well, that was a nice playthrough, Husky did all right, bit long though. Well, if you've made it this far, I'm sorry to say that we're just getting started. By 1917, with multiple military offensives underway, including a full-scale naval invasion of Macedonia from the Gulf of Tonkin, Dutch forces in Germany captured the German capital of Aachen. In 1920, by independent referendum, Hungary once again and for the final time became part of the Dutch Empire. When Dutch forces captured the German island city of Augsburg in 1923, it meant that Germany was eliminated from the game. That same year, Dutch forces in the west took back the Phoenician island city of Einouk, further opening the gateway to Nubian and Phoenician lands further west. By now, the Dutch Empire was generating over 1,000 science, culture, and faith per turn. Dutch forces made landfall on the Nubian mainland in 1925 when they captured the city of Sedinga. The next year, the Macedonian capital, Pella, fell to the Dutch. In 1937, almost by accident, the Dutch made their first exploration into space by launching the Earth satellite. That same year, the Dutch invasion of the Maya began to bear fruit when Dutch forces captured Tikal. The Maya were the only other major power in the game, who had even conquered all of Poland centuries earlier. Under different conditions, they might have threatened to win the game, but by now the Dutch had grown too large and too strong. It would take some time, but taking Tikal was a major first step in breaking them. Korea had been wiped out by Gaul and Nubia centuries ago. In 1940, Dutch forces walked into Seoul, giving them a foot in the New World for the first time. At the end of that year, Alexander's reign over Macedonia came to an end when the last of their cities revolted. In 1941, the Dutch military began to tip the scales in a major way by capturing the Phoenician capital city of Tyre. Although we were the ones seeking world domination, we were doing so humanely. Georgia opened Pandora's box and detonated an atom bomb on the Aztecs. Savages. The Dutch global beautification campaign had been underway now for over 100 turns. My empire was replete with builders and engineers busy transforming the landscape, making planet Earth a more hospitable place for all, so long as they were Dutch. Difficult to see the destruction, but that is the look of an empire that has been hit by nuclear weapons more than once. By 1950, the turns were getting long, and it gave me the opportunity to check the leaderboard. The Dutch were doing fine. When Dutch troops captured Sekesverevar, sandwiching the New World on every front, it meant that their ever-expanding empire now stretched from east to west across the entirety of the globe. Courtesy of its spy network, in 1952, the Dutch learned of the extent of the devastation wrought upon the Aztecs at the hands of its hostile neighbors. When Dutch forces captured the ancient English capital city of London, it ended Phoenician dominance over the region for good and ended the game for Dido. By the start of 1956, the Dutch were generating over 2,000 science, 2,000 culture, 2,000 faith, and 2,000 gold per turn. That same year, when the archaeologist Avo unearthed a classical era barbarian axe outside of Launceston, the Dutch Empire earned its 500th era score. A warning from here if you're still with me. You're probably like, wow, this is a long game. What more could possibly happen? Son, we're just getting started. In 1957, with the Hungarian, Gaul, and Mongolian empires collapsing, the Dutch Army of the East, responsible for integrating the provinces of Australia, Germany, and Portugal, united with the Dutch Army of the West, responsible for integrating the provinces of Canada, Nubia, and Phoenicia by capturing the Gallic city of Babrax. Doing so split the New World in two. Total global hegemony was near at hand, but like I said, there's still over 100 turns to go. We're just getting started. Getting this needlessly deep into a single game means that there are opportunities to indulge in one's whimsy. In 1958, in my hometown of Montreal, I built the Amundsen Scott Research Station for the first time ever. With every future Civic, players earn a governor promotion. In 1961, I earned my last, leveling up to the maximum all of my governors. In 1963, when Dutch troops captured Toronto, it meant the end of the Canadian Empire. By 1964, the Dutch Empire launched its Mars colony. Those Mayan cities were large and well defended. Tough nuts to crack. But we were still 115 turns from the end. Batter those defenses enough, and they do fall. Dutch forces captured the Mayan capital, Huancabnal, in 1965. By 1966, frustrated by the tedium of micromanaging every facet of the empire, for the first time in my Civ 6 playing career, I used the build queue. That year, Dutch forces captured the Nubian satellite city of He, eliminating them from the game. In 1968, Dutch troops captured the Mongolian capital city of Karakorum, eliminating Mongolia from the game. The end of my rivals was in sight. I was producing more science and culture and everything else than I ever had in my life. Utopia was beginning to feel achievable. But dust storms and hurricanes continued to threaten the peace and tranquility of my people. It was time to investigate whether running enough carbon recapture projects could maybe repair the climate and unmelt those polar ice caps. The game keeps prompting you to add governor promotions, but once you've completed all of the promotion trees, it does tap out at 6 available governor titles that are impossible to add. It's impossible to know just how many future civics I actually researched this game. By now, I had most of the artifacts and works of art in the game. Neatly placing them all to theme those museums and max out that tourism, which had swelled to over 8,000 per turn, seemed like a pointless challenge not worth the indulgence. By 1971, the Dutch Empire was generating over 3,000 science, 3,000 culture, and 3,000 gold per turn. Plus, I had stockpiled well over 100,000 faith, with nothing to really spend it on. Also that year, when Dutch forces captured Miskolc, it ended the game for Matthias Corvinus and the Hungarians. By 1975, even though we didn't need to because it wasn't among the win conditions, the Dutch launched their exoplanet expedition that would travel endlessly for the rest of the game out into the unknown forever. Along the way, as we were building Utopia with our fleets of builders and military engineers, it became imperative to cut down the time it would take for our cultural borders to spread. It meant investing some gold to buy the tiles around fringe cities like Hertogenbosch and Kingston and Delft. In 1977, when one of our archaeologists, Peter, discovered a barbarian broadsheet from the industrial era, our empire achieved over 600 era score. In 1981, turn 402, Dutch forces captured the Arctic city of Radumakos, defeating once and for all the Gauls. By this point in the game, the graphics card, who knows how hard it had to work, but strange glitches began to appear on the screen. In 1982, we hit another milestone when our empire began producing over 10,000 tourism per turn. In 1988, after establishing a trade route between Amsterdam and Canberra, our empire was now running 100 trade routes. By turn 411, I had sunk over 30 hours into this game. I really wanted that score victory. I wasn't even sure what Utopia even meant at this point. The time between turns was beginning to take a while, and spoiler alert, as I was putting together the script for this game, to my horror, I realized that I was still only on part 17 of 35. And for some reason, there is like a file 23A, and there had already been a 3A. So what's that? 37 parts? So not even halfway there. And why is part 32 over 4 hours? Oh, geez. If there was one civilization that slowed Dutch progress in completing their quest of establishing Utopia, it was the Maya, along with their Polish province. But when Dutch forces captured the city of Poznan in 1992, it put an end to Lady Six Guy and the Maya. I was still founding new towns in 1993 on the last available pieces of land. New cities need a little extra love. Now, in my mind, I had set a goal of achieving full world domination by turn 400, hoping that having 100 turns to transform all of the land into my utopia would be enough time. Turns were also taking super long, and the time between turns even longer. It was turn 416 and the Aztecs in Georgia were still in the game. Portugal was also still in the game, but they were reduced to a couple of Arctic island towns that I was just hanging on to so that the game could get to the end. They were irrelevant. I thought I could speed things up if I just got rid of the Aztecs in Georgia faster than my planes and tanks could do. After all, I had stockpiled over 60 thermonuclear weapons, so why not use a couple? I figured clearing up all of the fallout would be quicker than constantly bombarding the city walls. Sorry, Aztecs, Georgia had already hit you pretty hard. I felt kind of bad. But
you want to make an omelet, you got to break some eggs.
We struck at Tlacopan in 1995, and then Ixtapaluca. We also hit targets in Georgia beginning with Zugdidi, and then Tbilisi soon after, followed by Poti after that, and then Mtishketa too, killing our own spy in the process. We also hit Hueshtola and Azcapotzalco. Our lone rock band, Free History, performed a concert over the fallout in Tbilisi the next year. The show went well, considering. This is when I realized I have no parts 19, 20, and 21. Okay, so I guess the game was 34 sessions-ish? Free History played Tbilisi, again in the green, the very next year, and did all right. At the start of 1998, when Dutch forces captured Tamuin, it meant the end for the Aztecs. By 2001, although I had stockpiled over 11,000 diplomatic favor from running carbon capture projects, even though I was hemorrhaging close to 100 diplomatic favor per turn from controlling so many capital cities, I discovered that the polar ice, once melted, is kind of melted for good. I spent the early part of the 21st century cleaning up fallout with my armies of military engineers and builders. Between Georgia and the former empire of the Aztecs, there was a lot of cleaning up and restoration to do. By 2003, my empire had grown so large that the time between turns was getting absurd. Just remember, you're watching this at 300% speed. When Dutch troops captured Bikvinta, it was curtains for the Georgians, meaning that only Portugal and their remote Arctic island outpost of Faro Tomar remained. It was time to follow through on building Utopia, now without any adversaries, serious adversaries, to impede our progress. Though I was the largest emitter of CO2, obviously, it was a bit surprising to see that I was going to win the Climate Accords competition unchallenged. Oh, the graphical errors one can experience this deep into the game. When it came time to move a governor, the process was tough. By 2012, most of the fallout in Georgia and the former Aztec Empire was cleaned up, but for some of the ski hills that the workers in hazmats couldn't access. But most of the infrastructure was still on fire and there was a lot of cleanup left to do. By 2017, the Dutch Empire was generating over 15,000 tourism per turn. I'm guessing most of those were domestic. When 2018 came around, we were generating over 5,000 science, culture, faith, and gold per turn. Somehow, we had also stockpiled over 20,000 diplomatic favor just from running carbon recapture projects, as well as over 100 thermonuclear weapons. When a Dutch naturalist built a national park outside of Dordrecht in 2020, it pushed our ERA score over 700. In 2024, even as by far the largest emitter of CO2, we won the Climate Accords competition by quite a margin, having stockpiled over 20,000 diplomatic favor in the process. The polar ice caps were still gone, though. With 40 turns to go and with almost every owned tile in the game taken up by a city district or a tile improvement, it was time to thank Granada for their centuries of faithful service and for providing the Dutch people with countless Alcazar improvements by betraying them and incorporating their city into our empire. Dutch forces occupied the city the following turn. By the year 2030, this game was starting to feel like work, and I just wanted it to be over. There were less than 40 turns left when I started on part 32, a session which lasted over 4 hours. In fact, the last 38 turns of this game took over 10 hours to complete. The first 38 turns took 13 minutes. For a studio that frets about players not finishing games, Firaxis, hear me now. Forget civ switching, forget crises, forget balancing civs. This is the issue you need to address. Only one rival remained in the game, Portugal. By 2032, we had amassed an army on their border comprised of missile cruisers, nuclear submarines, and, well, since every artifact had been unearthed, our excess archaeologists were there too. A sizable fleet of bombers were also in range, also ready. Oh, and we had stockpiled well over 100 thermonuclear weapons. You can try and build Utopia, but the occasional sandstorm can wreak havoc with farmland. Lucky we have builders on hand to take care of the situation. In 2035, there was still a bit of Arctic land to be settled, so the Dutch founded the city of Leeuwarden. Why is a nuke the cheapest thing to build? Because we had banked over 27,000 diplomatic favor, most of our cities were now running either harbor shipping or commercial hub investment projects. By turn 472, we were now generating over 10,000 gold per turn. By 2037, the Dutch Empire was generating over 6,000 science, over 7,000 culture, 14,500 faith, over 11,000 gold, and more than 16,000 tourism. Every single turn. All trade routes came out of or went through Amsterdam, which had now swelled to a population size of 44. By 2039, it was producing over 450 production per turn. By 2040, hunting down those last few tiles that hadn't been developed with a tile improvement or a railroad proved to be a challenge. My job at this point was pretty much setting up each city's build queue to continually run wealth-generating projects. With less than 20 turns to go, I was now tending to this game. The time between turns could be upwards of 10 minutes. I would cook meals, buy groceries, I would read a couple of books, clean the house. There's always something to do. When the CPU was finished making its calculations, I'd return to the game and do all the things I needed to do. Then I'd go back to my chores. Although the game was becoming more of a chore than my chores. In 2043, we received a news report that Portugal, bless them, had finally launched their Earth satellite. It made me laugh. With so many turns left and so little to do, I really tried to micromanage this Utopia. I even put mountain tunnels in absurd places just because nothing else could be built there. Suddenly, there it was, the countdown to my deliverance. With 10 turns to go, we were feeling confident, so it was time to milk the last drops of this cow. We'd need to play it just right so the loyalty from our cities wouldn't flip Portugal's into full rebellion. But in 2044 AD, we declared war on the last of our rivals. Time for our army of surplus archaeologists to move in. This was their time. Archaeologists, charge! The next turn, we captured Tomar. Amsterdam was now 48 population. Could we hit 50? Turn 492, we captured Faro, leaving only tiny Portalegre standing. Although for some reason, even though it occupied a measly 4 tiles, it seemed necessary to batter their defenses down to nothing. With the end of the turn, we learned that we had played it just right, as there were 7 turns to go and little Portalegre could only flip loyalty after 9 turns. Choice. Staring down a half dozen more turns that would take forever, I had the brilliant idea that because score was the only available victory condition, maybe I could destroy Portugal and just play out the last 6 turns without them, and actually control 100% of the map. Nope. It turns out you do need at least one friend to play with in the sandbox. You get the domination victory video, but it leads to a very uncomfortable, you only won because everybody else lost, end screen, as if I had nothing to do with it. This is the worst friend zone of victories. What does this even mean? When you check the Hall of Fame afterward, it just says victory. No victory type, just victory. What is that? That did not satisfy me and my lust for the score victory. So let's forget about that and just go back. Just pretend like that never happened. But of course, bank that information. It could be useful someday. I don't know how. Maybe one day you too will strive for the hollow empty victory to add to your Hall of Fame. I wonder if that's a Steam achievement or not. Moving on. Back to more build queues. Ugh. I now had to protect Port Alegre like a fragile egg, but the end was in sight. In 2048, 2 turns before the end, Amsterdam reached a population of 50. Still, with just 2 turns remaining and my borders continually swelling, there was always one more tile to track down and add an improvement to. Even at turn 499, there would always be a pesky tile without a railroad or an improvement, but ha! I got him. With only 1 turn to go and my victory all but certain, it was time to take one last look over my great Utopia project. And the one city left to look upon it from its backward, frigid world that was incomprehensibly not Dutch. It turns out you gotta play that 500th turn. In so doing, my yields capped at 6,358 science per turn, 7,703 culture per turn, 1,016,758.6 stockpiled faith, earning 17,442 per turn, 657,206 stockpiled gold, earning 13,087 per turn, 18,138 tourism per turn, 37,168 stockpiled diplomatic favor, but losing 94 per turn, 172 trade routes, and a stockpile of 164 nuclear weapons. Even on turn 500, there was an unimproved tile to hunt down, but we got it. Damn, man, 2 tiles. Wow, a 3rd tile, but we are thorough. 4th tile. 5th tile. Leave no tile behind. And just for good measure, let's end the game at peace and having struck the most profitable peace deal we can. And then, a solid 10 minutes after ending the final turn, it happened. I got to see that ever-elusive score victory video.
It's done.
My final score was 12,367, eclipsing the great Augustus Caesar by more than 10,000 points. At last, a score victory was added to my Hall of Fame. And that score of 12,367 eclipsed my previous high score of Eleanor of Aquitaine, played back in 2020 by more than double. The game details were understandably absurd. We trained 649 builders, fought 4,745 battles, killed 425 units, and lost only 61. We conquered 188 cities, controlled all but only built 5 wonders. Lady Six Skies and Tamar's exoplanet expeditions actually traveled further than mine and went for over 300 light years. I was actually over 48,000 to the good in terms of CO2 emitted. I mean, look at that graph. At heart, I must be an environmentalist. Despite my nuclear conquest late in the game, Tamar was as nasty as I was, and she didn't exactly have ambitions to build Utopia. Or maybe she did. I can't read her mind. My culture, faith, gold, and science generation charts went stratospheric. Kids, don't try this at home. It's not worth it. I love a good Civ session as much as the next man, but there did come a point where shooting for this victory condition stopped making sense, at least with the parameters I had set up. I mean, it might work fine to engineer this on a smaller map size or a faster game speed, but man, oh man, I put my CPU through the ringer on this one. 10 minutes between turns is a bit much. What I do endorse, though, is setting fun goals for yourself when you play. I had a commenter say once that his only goal when playing was to always build the Amundsen Scott research station. Though I've never been a chaser, I see why Steam has these achievements in place. It's a terrible idea for those just wanting to have fun and play the game, but it is kind of fun if you've been there and done that to chase the last of those strange niche quests. I think I saw someone once who completed the One Tree Hill achievement, which requires performing a concert adjacent to a Maori Pa tile improvement. Not why we should play the game, but I get it. Go for it. So what does Utopia even mean, and did I achieve it? For me, it meant populating all land tiles with a district or some kind of improvement, whether it be a unique tile improvement, a national park, a mine, lumber mill, farm, or whatever else. If I could build a polder, I would build a polder. On water tiles in deep ocean, if I could build a seastead, I would. Where I could put an offshore wind farm, I did. This was the trickiest part. You can't put two seasteads next to each other, so there could be some optimization opportunities missed. But I am anything but a min-maxer, as you see, so let's let that go. All resource tiles I improved. And, in a pinch, there was Liang's fisheries or parks tile improvements. If a city had a particular district, I couldn't possibly put every district in every city, that would be ridiculous, but it had to have a tier 3 building. Every city had all of the city center improvements. If a theater square had an archaeological museum, well, you saw the result. I pulled out every artifact. I put a railroad on every land tile. I put a ski hill on every available hill, and a mountain tunnel on the rest. I don't think there was a single workable tile that didn't get worked. Obviously, the environment does always present a problem. I couldn't just coerce the other civs into caring for it the way I did. I mean, by the end. I guess the only way was to take their cities. But either way, when the polar ice caps are gone, they're gone. And weather is unpredictable. But I did make sure to have builders and engineers standing by for when and if that happened. The world was at peace, and I controlled all but 4 tiles, and whatever was left over as international waters. My yields and stockpiles overflowed, as you saw, and my score raged out of control. I don't think a game like this was ever the intent of the designers, but this goes to show that it is possible. So what do you think? Did I achieve my utopian dream? What's the most absurd game of Civ you've ever played? How far would you be willing to push an impossible dream? Let me know in the comments, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Also, this took a lot out of me. Don't be surprised if I play a little old world for a while before I get back to Civ 6. But it'll happen. Believe that. And of course, remember to keep playing and making your own civilization story, your own amazing path through history, and I'll see you next time.